The snow falls slowly, painting each inch of the forest white. The wind howls between the trees, blowing against the small, lonely cabin in the middle of nowhere. Inside, the fire in the fireplace dances, casting shadows on the wooden walls. Sarah is sitting in her favorite chair, wrapped in a thick blanket, with a warm cup of tea cradled in her hands. Years ago, she traded the hectic city life for this absolute peace. But on that night, something felt different. The silence of the forest had always comforted her, but now there was something wrong. A subtle unease, as if the world around her was holding its breath. Sarah furrows her brow and tilts her head, trying to listen past the crackling firewood. And then it happens. A muffled sound, almost imperceptible, a noise from outside. Her body tenses. What could it be? Perhaps the wind, maybe a heavy branch falling from a tree? But then it comes again. 3 soft knocks on the door. Weak, hesitant, but real. Sarah's heart races. She sits up straight in her chair, gripping the cup tightly between her fingers. Who would knock on her door at this hour in the midst of a storm? Fear mingles with curiosity. The cabin is miles from the nearest town. No one should be out there. With a lump in her throat, Sarah stands up, leaving the cup on the table. Her bare feet touch the cold wooden floor. The wind outside seems to blow harder, as if trying to warn her. She hesitates, staring at the door. For a moment, she considers ignoring it, pretending she didn't hear. But what if it's someone needing help? A lost traveler in the snow? She takes a deep breath and steps forward. The knocks come again, a little louder this time. A shiver runs down her spine. Each step toward the door feels like an eternity. Her mind races, trying to rationalize. If it were an animal, it wouldn't knock, right? If it were a person, why wouldn't they call for help? The wind howls stronger, rattling the windows. Sarah feels her heart pounding in her chest. Her hand trembles as she reaches for the doorknob. She presses her ear against the cold wood, holding her breath. The silence outside is overwhelming. No sound of footsteps, no voice. Just the wind. Then, a heavy sigh. Low, hoarse. Definitely not human. Sarah instinctively steps back, her stomach tightening. Her eyes fixate on the closed door. On the other side, something is waiting. Sarah feels her heart hammering in her chest. For a moment, all she can do is stand there, frozen, staring at the door. On the other side, the silence stretches heavy, dense. The wind continues to blow, scratching against the wooden walls of the cabin, but she knows. She knows she's not alone. Something is there, waiting. She takes a deep breath, trying to control her fear. Logic screams at her not to open it, but curiosity gnaws at her. With trembling hands, she grips the cold doorknob and slowly turns it. The door creaks open a few inches. The cold air rushes into the cabin like a sharp breath. And then she sees. Right there on the threshold is a brown bear. Large, covered in snow, with its dark fur matted against its wet body. Its deep, dark eyes meet Sarah's. But there's no threat in them. Just exhaustion. And then Sarah notices something even more terrifying. Behind the bear, 2 small cubs tremble in the snow. The shock is immediate. Instinct screams for her to close the door right now. Bears are wild, unpredictable, dangerous, but something feels wrong here. The bear doesn't advance, doesn't growl, it simply stands there, watching. The cubs huddle close, their little paws sunk in the soft snow. They look so small, so fragile. Sarah feels her chest tighten. She's never seen a bear act like this. If she were a threat, the bear would have already attacked. If the bear were a threat, it would have forced its way in, but there they are, mother and cubs, waiting. The wind howls again, and one of the cubs curls up even tighter, letting out a soft whimper. Sarah's heart aches even more. She knows what happens to such small cubs exposed to the extreme cold. She knows that winter is cruel to those who can't find shelter, and she knows more than anything that this mother is here for a reason. But what to do? She gazes at the bear once more. She could simply close the door, pretend this never happened. But then, the bear takes a small step forward. Not a threat, but a plea. Its body trembles, its paws stiff with frost. And its eyes plead. Sarah feels the air rush from her lungs. Every cell in her body screams that this is an impossible choice. But she knows, in a matter of hours, maybe minutes, it could be too late for that mother and her cubs. And now? What should she do? The wind cuts like blades of ice. Sarah feels her face burning from the cold, but she can't move. The bear stands there, still on the threshold, its body shaking, its eyes locked onto hers. The cubs are even more huddled, barely able to keep their little paws in the snow. They are freezing. The instinct for survival screams for her to close the door, lock herself in, push away the danger, pretend none of this is happening. But can she? Can she simply turn her back and leave them there? Because if she does, she knows exactly what will happen. The blizzard shows no mercy, and a desperate mother will do anything to protect her children. The dilemma weighs like a stone in her chest. She knows the rules of nature. She understands that intervening could be a mistake. But she also knows that sometimes the line between life and death isn't drawn by wild laws. It's drawn by a decision. One single decision. She looks at the cubs once more. One of them can barely keep its eyes open. The mother bear sways slightly, exhausted. How long have they been out there? How much longer could they hold on? Sarah feels her breath falter. Her heart pounds so hard it feels like it's echoing inside her. If she opens the door, everything could go wrong. But if she doesn't open it, that would already be wrong. She bites her lip, her sweaty hand gripping the cold doorknob. Time seems to stop. Only the sound of the wind fills the space between them. Sarah feels a shiver run down her spine. And then she does something she never thought she would do. She takes a small step back. Just a tiny, almost imperceptible movement. But it's enough. The door stays open. An invitation. The warm air from the cabin mingles with the cold of the night. The mother bear blinks slowly, as if processing what is happening. Does she understand? Does she trust enough to accept? Sarah holds her breath, unsure of what will happen next. All she can do is wait. The warm air of the cabin mixes with the biting cold of the night. Sarah feels her chest rising and falling rapidly, her heart hammering. The doors open, the choice has already been made. But now she wonders if she has just made the biggest mistake of her life. The mother bear doesn't move right away. She watches Sarah for a long moment, as if trying to understand if this is real. Then, with a heavy sigh, she takes her first step inside. Slow, cautious. The cubs follow her, their fragile little paws sliding on the wooden floor. Sarah instinctively takes a few steps back. She feels afraid. It's inevitable. A wild bear is now inside her home. But at the same time, there's something different about the scene. The mother bear doesn't growl, doesn't raise her claws, doesn't show any threat. Just exhaustion. Just an urgent need for warmth and shelter. The cubs, on the other hand, do not hesitate. As soon as they feel the warmer ground, they collapse right there, small heaps of fur curled up, breathing irregularly. Sarah swallows hard. They were on the brink. The mother bear walks to a corner near the fireplace. Her movements are slow and careful, as if she knows that this place doesn't belong to her. She lies down there, her body still tense, her eyes always turned towards Sarah. Neither of them fully trusts the other. Hours pass. The snow continues to fall outside. The wind howls against the windows. But inside the cabin, the only sounds are the heavy breathing of the mother bear and the deep, peaceful sleep of the cubs. For the first time, perhaps in a long time, they are safe. Sarah tries to keep her eyes open, but the warmth of the fireplace and the exhaustion of the night weigh heavily on her. Before falling asleep, one last thought crosses her mind. And tomorrow? What will happen when the sun rises? The first thing Sarah feels when she wakes up is warmth. The fireplace is still softly crackling, spreading a cozy heat throughout the cabin. For a moment, she forgets what happened the night before. But then, as she opens her eyes, she remembers. The bear is still there. Lying near the fireplace, motionless, her breathing slow and deep, she sleeps. The cubs are snuggled up beside her, small heaps of fur that now seem much more relaxed than when they arrived. Sarah doesn't move. She simply watches. There's something almost surreal about the scene. Never in her life did she imagine she would be there, sharing her home with a family of bears, but somehow it feels right. She notices the details she hadn't seen before. The mother's fur is dirty, hardened by ice. Her paws have small cracks, wounds caused by the extreme cold. She was at her limit. If she hadn't found shelter, perhaps she wouldn't have survived. Suddenly, the bear stirs. Sarah holds her breath, every muscle in her body tensing. The large head lifts, the dark, deep eyes meeting hers. The moment lasts only a few seconds, but it feels like an eternity. And then, something unexpected happens. The mother bear lets out a long sigh and lowers her head again. She doesn't see Sarah as a threat. There's no growl, no tension, just exhaustion and trust. A silent understanding. Sarah feels a lump in her throat. She never thought a wild animal could convey so much with just a look. She understands. This isn't just any bear. This is a mother who fought until the last second to save her children. She takes a deep breath, not knowing what will happen when the bear fully wakes up. But in that moment, right there, in that small, shared space between human and beast, there is peace. The first ray of sunlight slips through the cracks in the window, bathing the cabin in a gentle light. Sarah blinks a few times, feeling reality slowly return. For a moment, she almost forgets that she is not alone. But then, a subtle movement jolts her fully awake. The mother bear stirs. First, just a lazy lifting of her head, as if testing her body after a long night. Then, a deep yawn, revealing enormous teeth that would make anyone recoil. But Sarah doesn't move. She simply watches, her heart racing, waiting for what would come next. The cubs are the next to wake up. One of them awkwardly stretches, slipping on the wooden floor before snuggling back into their mother's fur. The other opens its tiny mouth in a nearly silent yawn. They look so peaceful, as if this cabin is a home. But Sarah knows it isn't. They don't belong here. And somehow it seems that the mother bear knows that too. She slowly rises, shaking off her body, her eyes turning toward the door. The message is clear. It's time to go. A pang grips Sarah's chest. After everything, after the impossible choice, after a night filled with uncertainty, now comes the farewell. But how can she be sure they will be okay? The forest is still covered in snow. Winter remains merciless. The bear takes a step forward. Then she stops. She turns her head and looks at Sarah one last time. There is no fear in that gaze, no threat, just something that feels like gratitude or perhaps understanding, as if somehow she knows that this unknown woman saved her family. Sarah feels a lump in her throat, but she doesn't say anything. Instead, she walks to the door and opens it. The cold air rushes into the cabin like a sharp breath, but this time, it doesn't feel hostile. It's merely the call of the forest, reminding the mother and her cubs that this is their place. The bear doesn't hesitate any longer. With one last look, she crosses the threshold and walks into the vast whiteness. The cubs stumble behind her, still drowsy but following without question. And then, in a matter of seconds, they disappear among the trees. Sarah stands there in the open doorway, feeling the icy wind brush against her face. The tracks in the snow are still fresh, small paw prints fading into the direction of the dense forest. But the bear and her cubs are already gone. She knew this moment would come. From the instant she opened the door the night before, from the moment she made that impossible decision, she always knew it would be temporary, but that doesn't make the goodbye any easier. For a long time, she remains there, staring into the empty white landscape. The silence around her now feels different. No longer frightening, but lonely. As if something precious has just left, leaving a void that nothing can fill. Sarah takes a deep breath and slowly closes the door. The warmth of the cabin is still there. The smell of burnt wood and hot tea. But their presence, that feeling of sharing something greater with another wildlife, it is gone. She tries to return to her routine. She feeds the fire in the fireplace, heats up some coffee, picks up a book to read. But her mind keeps drifting back to the image of the bear looking at her before leaving. Did she understand? Did she, on some level, recognize what Sarah did for her and her cubs? Hours pass, and the snow continues to fall outside. The house feels emptier than ever. Sarah wonders if she will ever see them again, or if that was the first and last time their paths crossed. She approaches the window, letting her eyes wander through the forest, searching for any movement. But all she sees are trees covered in snow, bending slightly under the weight of winter. Finally, she sighs and steps away. Perhaps this was just another story of nature. A brief encounter, a fleeting miracle, and nothing more. Or perhaps something much greater was yet to come. Winter passed. The snow slowly melted, giving way to damp soil and the first green leaves of spring. Sarah continued her life in the cabin, but she never forgot that night. She never forgot those dark, deep eyes, nor the silence laden with meaning between her and the bear. Many times she found herself gazing out the window, wondering where they might be. Did they survive? Did the cubs grow strong? Or did the forest, with its beauty and cruelty, reclaim what once seemed a miracle? Then, on an ordinary morning, something makes her stop. A movement among the trees. Slow, subtle, but unmistakable. Her heart races before she even comprehends what she is seeing. And when she finally realizes, her breath escapes her lungs. There, among the shadows of the forest, she is, the mother bear. But now she doesn't look fragile or exhausted. Her fur glistens in the sunlight. Her paws tread firmly on the damp earth. She has survived, and she is not alone. The cubs are with her, no longer the small, trembling balls of fur that entered her cabin on that winter night. Now they are strong, large, almost young adults. They have grown. Sarah feels her eyes burn. For a long moment, no one moves. She and the bear stare at each other, separated by a few meters, and by something invisible yet powerful. A bond that time has not erased. The bear doesn't advance. She doesn't ask for anything. She is just there. As if she had returned simply to say, "I remember." Then, with the same serenity with which she appeared, the bear turns and disappears into the forest, taking her cubs with her. Sarah stands there, her heart tight yet full at the same time, because now she knows. Some encounters are forever. We don't always understand the impact we have on someone's life. Sometimes a simple act of kindness can mean the difference between life and death. And often, those we help can never say thank you with words. Sarah opened her door to the unknown, to fear, to the most primal instinct of nature. But above all, she opened her heart. And the bear, in a way that only animals know, understood. This story reminds us that the world is not just made of rules and survival. It is made of invisible connections, of trust, of moments that change us forever. So the next time you encounter someone in need, be it human or animal, remember, what you do can echo far beyond what your eyes can see. And you? Have you ever experienced something like this? Have you ever felt a connection with an animal that words cannot explain? Share your story in the comments below. I would love to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, as it motivates us to bring you more exciting stories like this one. See you in the next video.